Look, mental illness is not a choice, but you still have choices. Nobody chooses a mental illness. Nobody sets out at the beginning of their day and says, I want a mental disease. Nobody does that. They are medical conditions. I'm not arguing that. They are illnesses of the brain, obviously. The chemicals, the shape, the composition of the brain actually changes. It's a disease. And the causes, the root causes to this are complex. I'm not debating any of that. What I am addressing are the comments and the messages coming at me that addiction is not something somebody chooses over, say, choosing their family or their children. I disagree. People with mental illness can either evade accountability to justify their ignorant behaviors with their diagnosis, or we as a collective can come to the realization that even with a mental illness, we still have choices. The explanation for stupid behavior is understandable. I get it, but it is not acceptable. I've lived through this firsthand. I have researched this countless hours. I am not a medical health professional. I am not giving medical health advice by any means or in any way. I am, however, a holistic health practitioner. And like I said, I have countless hours of study and research into mental well-being paired with my firsthand experience with mental instability or mental conditions. And I'm addressing the most common statements or comments or opinions that people send to me regarding my kid's dad's choice to pick his addictions over his kids and his family. Addiction is rooted by a mental illness, absolutely. But the actual acts of addiction are choices. To suggest that we have no self-awareness when activated, or that the illness just makes you unable to see clearly enough to make solid choices, just doesn't hold up and excuse someone from the responsibility of their decisions. People don't choose to live with the symptoms and effect of mental disorders. That's absurd to even say something like that, and for good reason. Any type of mental illness affects thoughts, emotions, actions, physical well-being, emotional well-being, relationships, families, and every part of your life, work relationships, the dynamics of the way you take care of your body. People don't choose to develop mental illness, and they don't choose the effects the illnesses have over their lives. While it's true that having a mental illness is not a choice, it's also true that people living with these mental illnesses do have choices in their life. They don't lose the ability to make a choice just because they're making bad ones or just because they have a mental illness. Mental illness cannot take away someone's power to choose. In the idea or the category of addiction, I'm speaking specifically to addiction. So don't throw at me schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Don't throw all those other things at me. I'm talking specifically about the comments and messages that I get about addiction. Okay. It's still, you still have the power to choose. My husband could either drive home from wherever he was coming from, or he could drive to the bar. That was a choice. He could go to the store and purchase beer, or he could purchase kombucha tea. That was a choice. He could choose to do drugs in the garage by himself, or he could come in the house and build a model car with our sons. That was a choice. He could choose to plan his daughter's 13th birthday party with her, or gamble his family's every last cent away with scrolling on his phone with his little games that cost money to play. That was a choice. He could also choose to get help, to reach out to somebody with resources that could help him, his sponsor, the mental treatment facility of which he lived at for half of a year out of state, or he could call his low vibrating people to reaffirm his reasoning because he was stuck in this loop of making bad decisions. And he knew reaching out to those people would support stupid decisions. He knew that. He knew that if he were to call, say, his sponsor from counseling, that sponsor was not going to support his drugs and alcohol addictions. He also knew that if he reached out to these low vibrating, low life kind of people, they were going to support the negative decisions that he was wanting to make. Okay. So although they aren't wise or constructive choices, and obviously they aren't that of someone who's mentally stable, they are nonetheless still choices, even though he is mentally unstable. Mental illness for sure 100% makes it harder to make good choices, but it is not excuse, or it's not excused to make bad ones. So for those who want to reach out and tell me that I'm sure your kid's father would never choose his addictions over spending time with his children or over being part of his children's life, you are wrong. It is a choice. He did make that choice. He might feel really bad about it. He might wish he didn't do it. He might wish he could take it back, and he might have extreme guilt and regret and shame over it. But he still had the power to choose. Nobody took that from him. He chose the devil, and the devil keeps him from his family and from his best self. And you can disagree with me. I don't care. I love you just the same. I love you because you're a human being, and I love human beings, all of them. But that doesn't mean that I like you or that I like all human beings just because I love you. So we can agree to disagree if that's the belief. But reality has it that even though very poor decisions were made and his children were not made priority, addiction to drugs, alcohol, gambling, and all of the other choices that he made over his children were still his choices. He still had the power to make those choices, and nobody took that from him.